The sky turned black on a Tuesday morning. Admiral stood at the window of the Seoul Global Defense Center, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He was 63 years old. He had fought in 3 wars. He had seen death and victory and everything in between. But he had never seen anything like this. The ships came through the clouds like giant metal insects. They were huge, bigger than anything humans had ever built. They moved slowly, silently, as if they had all the time in the world. And perhaps they did. Perhaps they knew something that humanity did not. "Sir," said Lieutenant Park, stepping up beside him. Her voice was calm but could see the fear in her eyes. "We are receiving reports from every major city. They are landing everywhere at the same time. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, everywhere." Nodded slowly. He had expected this. When the first signals came from deep space 3 months ago, the world's governments had debated what to do. Some wanted to send messages of peace. Others wanted to prepare for war. In the end, they did neither. They simply waited and hoped. Hope, thought bitterly, was not a strategy. The aliens called themselves the Dominion. At least, that was the closest translation humans could manage. They had sent a single message to Earth when their fleet entered the solar system. The message was simple and direct. "We are the Dominion. We have conquered 47 worlds. Your planet is now the 48th. Surrender your resources and your labor. Resistance is extinction." No greeting, no negotiation, no questions about human culture or history or dreams. Just a command, delivered with the confidence of a species that had never known defeat. Watched as the first soldiers descended from the ships. They were tall, perhaps 7 feet, with gray skin and 4 arms. They wore black armor that seemed to absorb light. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. They moved in perfect formation like machines, like a single organism with 1,000 bodies. "They are beautiful," whispered, "in a terrible way." "Yes," agreed, "the most dangerous things often are." They did not attack immediately. They simply landed, formed their lines, and waited. It was a display of power. They wanted humanity to see their strength. They wanted humans to understand that resistance was pointless. In cities around the world, people ran. They screamed. They cried. They prayed to gods who did not answer. Some tried to fight with guns and knives and bare hands. They cut them down without emotion. Their weapons fired beams of blue light that turned human bodies to ash in seconds. Within 6 hours, they controlled every major city on Earth. In the defense center, gathered his officers around a table covered with maps and screens. The faces around him were pale with shock. Some were crying. Others stared at nothing, their minds refusing to accept what had happened. "We have lost," said General O, a thick man with gray hair and tired eyes. "We should negotiate. Perhaps they will show mercy." "They do not know the word mercy," replied. "They have conquered 47 worlds. Do you think any of those worlds survived by begging?" "Then what do you suggest?" demanded. "We fight with what? Our weapons are toys compared to theirs, our armies are nothing. We are insects to them." Smiled. It was a strange smile, cold and sharp. The officers around the table stared at him as if he had gone mad. "Do you know what I love about insects, General?" asked. "They survive, they adapt. They find ways to live when everything else dies. Dinosaurs are gone, empires have fallen, stars have burned out, but insects remain." He turned to the screens showing the forces in Seoul. The aliens were setting up command posts, establishing supply lines, doing all the things that a conquering army does. They were efficient. They were organized. They were confident. "They think this war is over," said. "They think we will submit because we are weaker. But they do not understand something important about humans." "What is that, sir?" asked. "We do not know how to give up." That night, as they patrolled the empty streets of Seoul, something strange happened. The power went out, not just in one building or one district, but across the entire city. The alien soldiers stopped, confused. Their helmets had night vision, so darkness did not blind them, but their communication systems had stopped working. Their weapons had stopped charging. Their armor had locked in place. Across the city, humans emerged from hiding. They came from basements and subway tunnels and abandoned buildings. They carried flashlights and torches. They carried knives and hammers and pipes. Some carried guns, but most did not. They attacked in waves, striking the frozen soldiers with everything they had. The aliens could not move, could not fight back, could not call for help. They could only watch as the creatures they had dismissed as primitive climbed onto their armored bodies and found the gaps, the weak points, the places where weapons could reach flesh. By morning, 300 soldiers were dead. It was a small number. They had millions of soldiers. 300 was nothing to them, but it was something to humanity. It was proof that the invaders could die. In a hidden bunker beneath island, Admiral received the reports with a grim satisfaction. The electromagnetic pulse bomb had worked. Doctor, a physicist from KAIST, had built it in 3 days using parts from old computers and captured alien technology. It was rough. It was ugly. It only worked for a few minutes before burning out. But it worked. They will adapt, warned. They will find a way to protect against this. Of course they will, agreed. And then we will find another way to hurt them. And when they stop that, we will find another, and another, and another, until they understand. Understand what? Turned to face the general. His eyes were hard as stone, but there was something else in them too, something that looked almost like joy. That they made a mistake coming here, that Earth is not a world to be conquered, that humanity is not a species that surrenders. He paused, letting the words sink in. We have spent our entire history fighting each other. War is in our blood, it is in our bones. They think they are predators and we are prey. They are wrong. He pointed to the map of Earth, covered with red markers showing positions. This is our world, our home, and we will take it back. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. Because that is what humans do. We fight, we survive, we endure, and in the end we win. The officers around the table looked at each other. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. The fear was still there, but now there was something else too. Something that they had never seen in the eyes of conquered species. Hope and hunger and rage. The war for Earth had begun. Doctor had not slept in 4 days. She sat in an abandoned subway station beneath, surrounded by wires and circuits and pieces of alien technology. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. But her mind was clear, focused on the problem in front of her like a laser. They had adapted, just as Admiral had predicted. After the Sol attack, they had upgraded their armor with new shielding. The electromagnetic pulse bombs no longer worked. Humanity needed a new weapon. You need to rest, said, placing a cup of tea beside her. He was a tall man with gentle eyes and steady hands. Before the invasion, he had been a telecommunications engineer. Now he was a soldier, a spy, and a builder of weapons. You will make mistakes if you are too tired. I will make mistakes if I am too slow, replied without looking up. Every hour we waste, more people die. Nodded sadly, he understood. His wife and 2 daughters had died in the first wave of attacks. He had watched from a rooftop as soldiers marched through his neighborhood, burning everything in their path. He had wanted to run down and fight, to die with his family. But something had stopped him, a voice in his head that said, "Survive now, revenge later." So he survived, and now he helped build the tools of revenge. Around them, the subway station was full of people. Engineers, scientists, hackers, students, old men and young women, people from every walk of life brought together by a common enemy. They called themselves the network, and they had cells in every city that they occupied. They did not understand the network. Their species had evolved differently. They thought as one, acted as one, followed orders without question. The idea of independent cells, each making their own decisions, sharing information through hidden channels was strange to them. They could not predict it. They could not control it. And that was humanity's greatest advantage. "I think I found something," said suddenly. She held up a small device, no bigger than a coin. "This is from their communication system. It controls everything, their weapons, their armor, their ships. One signal, one frequency." Leaned closer, studying the device. "If we could block that frequency—" "Not block," interrupted. "Hijack. If we can send our own signal on their frequency, we can give them false orders. Tell their weapons to shut down. Tell their armor to open. Tell their ships to crash." His eyes went wide. "Is that possible?" "I do not know," admitted, "but I am going to find out." While worked on her new project, the Resistance continued its war in other ways. Commander Shin had become a legend among the survivors. She was a fighter pilot who had lost her entire squadron on the first day of the invasion. Instead of giving up, she had retreated to the mountains and built a guerrilla army from the refugees she found there. Was 35 years old, small and thin, with short black hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. She had been trained to fight from the sky, but she quickly learned to fight from the ground. She studied learned their patterns, found their weaknesses. "They are predictable," she told her fighters one night, gathered around a small fire in a cave. "They follow rules. They do the same thing every time. That is their weakness." Young, barely 20 years old, raised his hand. He had been a university student before the invasion. Now he carried a rifle and wore clothes stained with blood and dirt. "But they are so strong. Their weapons can kill us from far away. How do we fight that?" Smiled. It was a dangerous smile, the smile of a predator. "We do not fight their weapons. We fight their minds. We make them afraid. We make them confused. We make them see enemies everywhere, even when there are none." She stood up and pointed to a map drawn on the cave wall. "Tomorrow, we attack their supply convoy here. We kill as many as we can, then we disappear. The next day, we appear on the other side of the mountain and attack again. We never stay in one place. We never fight when they are ready. We are ghosts. We are shadows. We are everywhere and nowhere." The fighters nodded. They were afraid, but they were also angry. Many had lost families, homes, everything they loved. They had nothing left except the will to fight. The attack on the convoy was a success. Fighters killed 30 soldiers and captured a shipment of weapons and food. More importantly, they sent a message. The mountains were not safe for the invaders. They responded by sending a larger force to find the guerrillas. But the mountains were vast and knew every path, every cave, every hiding place. The alien soldiers marched in circles, finding nothing but empty camps and false trails. Some of them began to see movement in the shadows. They fired at rocks and trees. They jumped at sounds in the night. Fear was a weapon more powerful than any gun. Back In finally completed her device. It was ugly, a mess of wires and circuits held together with tape. But when she activated it and pointed it at a captured weapon, something wonderful happened. The weapon turned off. Not just powered down, but completely dead, as if it had never been built. The device had sent a signal on the frequency, a signal that told the weapon to destroy its own circuits. "It works," whispered. She started to laugh, then to cry, then both at the same time. "It works." The news spread quickly through the network. Within days, copies of the device were being built in hidden workshops across the world. They were not perfect. They did not work every time, but they worked often enough to make a difference. In Paris, a resistance cell used the device to disable a patrol, then attacked with knives and clubs. In Tokyo, hackers used it to crash a transport ship into the ocean. In Cairo, a single brave woman walked into a command post, activated the device, and watched as every alien in the building fell to the ground, their armor locked, their weapons dead. They were confused. This had never happened before. On other worlds, the conquered species had given up quickly. They had accepted their fate. They had become slaves. But humans refused to accept. They refused to give up. They kept fighting, kept adapting, kept finding new ways to hurt the invaders. The commander in Seoul sent a message to the Dominion Council. These creatures are defective. They do not respond to superior force with submission. They become more dangerous when cornered. Request additional resources. The council was surprised. They had conquered 47 worlds without serious difficulty. This small blue planet was supposed to be easy. Instead, it was becoming a problem. They sent more soldiers, more ships, more weapons. They would crush this resistance, they decided. They would teach humanity the same lesson they had taught every other species, obedience or extinction. But the council did not understand what they were dealing with. They did not understand that humanity had spent its entire history fighting against impossible odds. They did not understand that humans grew stronger under pressure, not weaker. And they did not understand that the lesson was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the invasion. The world was burning. Cities lay in ruins. Millions had died. They controlled every government building, every military base, every power plant and factory. On paper, they had won. But paper does not fight wars, people do. Commander Shin stood on a cliff overlooking what used to be the city of. Half of it was rubble now. The other half was filled with soldiers, patrolling streets that no longer had names, guarding buildings that no longer had purpose. They thought they were the masters of this land. They were wrong. How many? Asked, crouching beside her. He had changed in 6 months. The soft university student was gone. In his place was a soldier, lean and hard and dangerous. His eyes had the look of someone who had killed and would kill again. 200 in the city center, replied. Another 100 at the port. Supply ship arrives tomorrow morning. Nodded. The network confirmed. The ship is carrying weapons for their new offensive, if we destroy it. We do not destroy it, said. We steal it. Stared at her. Steal a ship, how? Smiled. It was the smile that her fighters had learned to fear and love. It meant she had a plan. It meant something terrible was about to happen to the enemy. Doctor has been busy, she said. In her underground laboratory had not stopped working since her first breakthrough. The device that could shut down weapons had been just the beginning. Now she had something new, something bigger. I call it the voice, she explained to the resistance leaders gathered in the bunker beneath island. Admiral was there, older and thinner than before, but still alive, still fighting. General O stood beside him, no longer talking about surrender. The failure of every attempt at negotiation had taught him what already knew. There was no peace with there was only victory or death. Held up a device the size of a small radio. They communicate through a central network. Every soldier, every ship, every weapon is connected to this network. They receive orders and send reports through it. They cannot function without it. We know this, said impatiently. Your disruption devices have helped, but they only work at short range. This is different, said. This does not disrupt. This takes over. With the voice, we can send orders that the soldiers will believe come from their commanders. We can tell them to move, to stop, to attack each other. We can make them see enemies that are not there and ignore enemies that are. The room went silent. Leaned forward, his old eyes bright with new hope. You can control them. For short periods, yes. Their officers can override the false orders if they realize what is happening. But in the confusion of battle, with everything happening at once, she paused, letting them imagine the possibilities. We can create chaos, and chaos is our friend. The plan was simple but bold. Would lead a small team into the city through the old sewer tunnels. They would reach the port before dawn when the supply ship arrived. At the exact moment the ship landed, would activate the voice. The soldiers would receive orders to return to their barracks. Emergency orders, urgent and unquestionable. They would leave the port unguarded, confused but obedient. and in that window of time, his team would board the ship and take control. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of plan that humans had been executing for thousands of years. The night before the attack, sat alone on the cliff, watching the stars. Somewhere up there in the darkness between worlds, the Dominion ruled an empire of slaves. They had never met a species like humanity. They had never faced an enemy that refused to die. Thinking about home, asked, sitting down beside her. I do not have a home anymore, said quietly. They burned it in the first week. My parents were inside. I am sorry. Do not be. Sadness is a luxury we cannot afford. She turned to look at him, her eyes hard as diamonds. Tomorrow we take their ship, and when we do, we send a message to every human on Earth. We are still fighting, we are still alive, and we are coming for them. The attack began at dawn. Activated the voice from her bunker 500 kilometers away. Across, soldiers stopped what they were doing. They listened to orders that seemed to come from their commanders. Return to barracks. Emergency protocol. Do not engage. They obeyed. Of course they obeyed. They had been trained to obey since birth. Independent thought was a weakness that the Dominion had eliminated generations ago. And her team emerged from the sewers like ghosts. They moved through the empty streets, silent and fast. The port was ahead, the supply ship sitting on the landing pad like a gift from the heavens. There were guards, of course, 10 soldiers who had not received the false orders. They stood at the ship's entrance, weapons ready. Did not hesitate. She had learned that hesitation meant death. She raised her rifle, the one she had taken from a dead soldier months ago, and fired. 2 guards fell before the others understood what was happening. The battle was short and brutal. Killed 3 with a knife, moving between them like water, finding the gaps in their armor that had mapped. The other fighters swarmed the remaining guards, overwhelming them with numbers and fury. In less than 3 minutes, the entrance was clear. They ran into the ship. It was vast inside, built for creatures taller and stronger than humans. The controls were strange, covered with symbols that no human could read, but was with them, carrying a device that had built specifically for this moment. It connects to their systems, he explained, plugging the device into the control panel. It will translate their commands into something we can understand. I hope. The ship hummed to life. Lights flickered. Strange sounds filled the air. For a terrible moment thought they had failed. Then laughed, a wild and joyful sound. I have control, I have the ship. Then fly, commanded. Fly before they realize what happened. The ship rose from the port, clumsy and shaking, piloted by humans who had never flown anything like it. Below, the soldiers were emerging from their barracks, finally realizing they had been tricked. They fired at the rising ship, but their weapons could not penetrate its shields. Watched through the window as grew smaller beneath them. She felt something she had not felt in months. Not hope, not quite, but something close to it. Where do we go? Asked. Island said. We have a war to win, and now we have a weapon to win it with. The ship turned south, carrying its human crew toward the hidden base where Admiral waited. Behind them, the commanders sent panicked messages to their fleet. A ship had been stolen. A supply of weapons had been lost. But worse than that, far worse, was the realization that was slowly spreading through the invasion force. Humans could hurt them. Humans could trick them. Humans could take what was theirs. The storm was rising, and they were not ready for what was coming next. The Supreme Commander was afraid. He would never admit it, of course. Fear was weakness, and weakness meant death in the Dominion. But alone in his command chamber aboard the flagship that orbited Earth, he could not deny what he felt. This was supposed to be easy. Earth was a small world, home to a young species that had not even discovered faster-than-light travel. Their weapons were primitive. Their armies were divided. Their governments spent more time fighting each other than preparing for outside threats. The conquest should have taken a week. Instead, it had taken 8 months, and they still did not control the planet. Supreme Commander, his second officer said, entering the chamber with a report. We have lost contact with the 7th Division. What do you mean, lost contact? They were stationed in the region called Russia. 2 days ago, their signals stopped. We sent scouts. They found nothing. No bodies, no equipment, just empty buildings and silence. The Supreme Commander turned to the window and looked down at the blue planet below. It looked peaceful from up here, beautiful, even, but he knew the truth. That world was a trap. Every forest hid enemies. Every city was a battlefield. Every human was a potential killer. They are adapting faster than we expected, he said quietly. Every tactic we use, they find a counter. Every weapon we deploy, they learn to defeat. Perhaps we should request more forces from the Council, the officer suggested. We have already requested reinforcements 3 times. Each time the Council has sent what we asked, and each time the humans have grown stronger. He shook his head. More soldiers will not solve this problem. These creatures are different from any species we have conquered. Different how, Supreme Commander? They do not break. On other worlds, when we killed enough of them, the survivors surrendered. They accepted their place in the Dominion. They became obedient. He paused, remembering the reports he had read, the attacks that came from nowhere, the soldiers who died in their sleep, the officers who vanished and were found days later, their bodies arranged as warnings. Humans do not surrender. They get angrier, they get smarter, they get more dangerous. On Earth, Admiral was preparing the final offensive. It had taken 8 months to reach this point. 8 months of hiding, fighting, dying, and learning. Thousands of humans had sacrificed their lives to capture technology. Thousands more had worked in secret laboratories, reverse engineering alien weapons and building new ones. Now they were ready. The fleet is assembled, General O reported, pointing to the map that covered an entire wall of the command bunker. 37 ships, all captured or built from technology. Commander Shin will lead the air assault. Ground forces asked. 500,000 soldiers across 12 continents, armed with a mix of human and alien weapons, every one of them a volunteer, every one of them ready to die. Nodded slowly. He was old now, older than he had any right to be after 8 months of war, but his mind was sharp and his will was unbroken. Doctor stepped forward. She looked as tired as felt, but there was fire in her eyes. The voice is ready. At your signal, I will broadcast false orders to every soldier on the planet. It will not fool them for long, perhaps 10 minutes. But in that time, their chain of command will collapse. They will not know which orders are real and which are false. And the shields. I have built a device that can penetrate their ship's shields. It is not perfect. It will only create a small opening, lasting a few seconds. But if Commander Shin can deliver a weapon through that opening, the flagship falls, finished, and without their command ship their fleet will be lost. It was a desperate plan. Everything had to work perfectly. One mistake, one failure, and the entire offensive would collapse, but had learned something important in these 8 months of war. Humans were good at desperate plans. The attack began at midnight. Across the world, human soldiers rose from their hiding places and struck. In Beijing, they attacked the garrison with weapons that could now punch through alien armor. In London, they crashed captured ships into enemy positions, the pilots ejecting at the last moment. In New York, they flooded the subways and drowned hundreds of soldiers who had never learned to swim. And in Seoul, where it had all begun, Admiral led the assault personally. He was too old for frontline combat. Everyone told him that. But he had watched too many young people die while he hid in bunkers and gave orders. This time, he would fight beside them. The Battle of Seoul lasted 17 hours. Fought through streets he had walked as a young man, streets that were now filled with rubble and blood. Beside him fought soldiers from every nation, speaking different languages but understanding each other perfectly. They were humans. They were fighting for their world. Nothing else mattered. The commander in Seoul had established his headquarters in the old Parliament building. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by the best soldiers the Dominion had sent, but had not come this far to fail. For Earth, he said, as his team prepared to breach the building. For humanity. They attacked like a storm, like a force of nature, like something they had never seen before. High above, Commander Shin led the aerial assault. Her fleet of captured ships tore through the formations, weaving between energy blasts and missile trails. She had lost half her pilots in the first hour. She would probably lose more before the night was over. But the flagship was close now. The great command ship that controlled the invasion, that sent orders to every soldier on Earth. If she could destroy it, the war would be over. She called into her communicator, "I am in position. Activate the shield breaker." 500 kilometers below, pressed a button. The flagship's shields flickered. For exactly 3 seconds, a gap appeared in its defenses. Flew through that gap. Her ship was small and fast, designed for exactly this purpose. She dodged defensive fire, avoided collision with the flagship's hull, and found what she was looking for, the engine core, the heart of the great ship. She had one missile left, one chance to end this. "For everyone who died," she whispered, thinking of her parents, her squadron, the millions of humans who had sacrificed everything. "For everyone who will live." She fired. The explosion was visible from Earth, a bright flash in the night sky, like a new star being born. People across the world looked up and wondered what it meant. Then the soldiers stopped fighting. Without the flagship, they had no orders. Without orders, they had no purpose. They stood in confusion, weapons lowered, waiting for commands that would never come. In the Parliament building in Seoul, Admiral faced the Supreme Commander. The alien was wounded, his gray skin stained with purple blood. But he still stood, still held his weapon, still refused to fall. "You cannot win," the Supreme Commander said. "Even if you destroy us, the Dominion will send more. They will never stop. They will burn your world to ash." Smiled. It was the same cold, sharp smile he had shown his officers on the first day of the invasion. "Let them come," he said. "Let them all come. We will be waiting, and we will teach every one of them the same lesson we taught you." "What lesson?" "That humanity does not know how to lose." He raised his weapon and fired. The Supreme Commander fell. And across Earth, humans began to celebrate. They had won. Against impossible odds, against superior technology, against an empire that had never known defeat, they had won. But Admiral did not celebrate. He walked out of the ruined Parliament and looked up at the sky, at the stars that had sent enemies to his world. This war was over, but he knew deep in his heart that the next one was just beginning. The Dominion would hear what happened here, and they would be afraid. Good thought, let them be afraid. Let them know what we are. We are humanity, and we are just getting started. The message reached the Dominion Council 17 days after the fall of the flagship. They gathered in the Great Hall on their home world, a chamber that had witnessed the conquest of 47 planets. The walls were decorated with trophies from every species they had defeated. Weapons, flags, artifacts, skulls. But there was nothing from Earth. "Read it again," commanded the High Counselor, an ancient whose gray skin had faded almost to white. The messenger obeyed. His voice trembled. "The fleet is destroyed. The Supreme Commander is dead. The human forces have captured all remaining soldiers. They demand a full withdrawal from their solar system and recognition of their sovereignty." Silence filled the chamber. For generations, the Dominion had sent demands to other species. They had never received one. "This is not possible," one counselor said. "They are primitives. They do not even have faster-than-light travel." They have it now, another replied. They captured our ships. They studied our technology. Reports say they have already built new vessels using our designs. Then we send more forces. We send everything. We burn that planet until nothing remains. The High Counselor raised his hand for silence. He was old enough to remember the early days of the Dominion, when their empire was small and every conquest was a struggle. He had forgotten what it felt like to face a real enemy. Now he remembered. "We cannot afford another war with these creatures," he said slowly. "We sent 40,000 soldiers, 300 ships, our best commanders and our finest weapons. They defeated all of it. Then what do you suggest? Surrender?" "No," the High Counselor stood, his ancient bones creaking. "I suggest we leave them alone. We classify their system as a quarantine zone. Any vessel that approaches it will be destroyed by our own order." "You want us to retreat, to admit defeat?" "I want us to survive." He pointed at the map that displayed their empire. "We control 47 worlds, billions of subjects, an economy that spans star systems. One small planet is not worth risking all of that." The council debated for hours. Some wanted revenge. Some wanted negotiation. Some wanted to pretend the whole thing had never happened. In the end, they voted for survival. The message went out to every corner of the Dominion. Earth was forbidden. Any species that attempted to contact the humans would be destroyed. Any record of the invasion would be sealed. The hope that in time, the galaxy would forget what had happened. The galaxy did not forget. On Earth, 1 year after the invasion, President Han stood before the United Earth Assembly. It was a new government formed in the fires of war, representing every nation and every people. The old divisions still existed, but they seemed smaller now, petty, irrelevant. "1 year ago," said, "we faced extinction. An empire that had conquered 47 worlds came to our planet expecting easy prey. They found something else." The chamber was silent. Everyone remembered. Everyone had lost someone. "We lost millions of our people. Our cities were destroyed. Our way of life was shattered. But we did not break. We did not bow. We fought back with every weapon we had, from the most advanced technology to the most basic human courage." She paused, looking out at the representatives. At Commander Shin, now head of the New Earth Defense Force. At Doctor, who had been awarded every honor a grateful planet could give. At the young student who had become a hero, now serving as Earth's first interstellar ambassador. And at the empty chair where Admiral should have sat. He had died 3 months after the war, his body finally giving out from the strain of battle. But his spirit, his defiance, his refusal to accept defeat, lived on in everyone who had known him. "Today we launch our first interstellar mission," continued. "Doctor will lead a scientific expedition beyond our solar system. We go not as conquerors but as explorers, not as masters but as friends. We have seen what empire looks like. We have felt its weight. We will not become what we defeated." The chamber erupted in applause. Across the galaxy, other species were watching. They had tried to hide what happened on Earth, but secrets do not stay hidden forever. Traders talked. Slaves whispered. The story spread from system to system, growing larger with each telling. There was a planet, they said, a small blue world in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. Its people were young and primitive, but when they came to conquer them, something happened. They fought back. Not just resisted, not just survived. They fought back so hard, so fiercely, so relentlessly that the mightiest empire in the galaxy turned and ran. On a dozen enslaved worlds, people began to wonder. If the humans could win, perhaps they could too. Perhaps the Dominion was not as unbeatable as it seemed. Perhaps freedom was possible. The first rebellion started on a planet called Vex 7, 3 years after the Earth invasion. The slaves there had been working in the mines for generations, accepting their fate, believing they had no choice. Then they heard about Earth. and they found their choice. The rebellion was small at first, a few hundred workers refusing to obey, the sent soldiers to crush them, as they always had. But this time something was different. The rebels had new weapons, new tactics, new hope. And they had help. A ship appeared in orbit above Vex 7, broadcasting on all frequencies. It was a strange ship, built from a mix of technology and something else. Something alien, something human. "This is Commander Shin of the Earth Defense Force," the message said. "We have come to offer assistance. If you want to be free, we will help you fight. If you want peace, we will help you negotiate. The choice is yours." The choice was always theirs. That was what the humans believed. That was what made them different. On Vex 7, the slaves chose to fight, and with Earth's help they won. Over the next decade, rebellion spread across the Dominion like fire. World after world rose up, inspired by the story of Earth, armed with human weapons, trained by human soldiers. The empire that had stood for 1,000 years began to crumble. And at the center of it all, the little blue planet that had started everything continued to grow. They built new ships. They developed new technology. They reached out to other species, forming alliances based on respect rather than fear. They made mistakes, of course. They fought among themselves, as humans always had, but they never forgot the lesson they had learned in the fire of invasion. Unity, defiance, hope. 20 years after the war, Doctor returned from her latest expedition to find a monument being built in Seoul. It was a tall structure, reaching toward the stars, carved with the names of everyone who had died in the invasion. At its base was a simple message. "They came to conquer, we answered with a storm, empires shattered, humanity remained." Stood before the monument for a long time, remembering the fear and the pain and the death, remembering the hope and the courage and the victory, remembering the faces of friends who had not lived to see this day. "We did it," she whispered to the wind. "We survived." And somewhere in the depths of space, on worlds she had never seen, other species were telling stories about Earth, about the storm world, about the humans who did not know how to surrender. They told these stories in whispers, in hidden places, away from their masters. But someday they knew they would tell them in shouts. They would tell them in freedom. They would tell them in victory. Because if humans could win, anyone could. And that was the greatest weapon of all, not ships or technology or soldiers. Hope. The Dominion had conquered 47 worlds. They had built an empire on fear and obedience, and the belief that resistance was useless. Then they met humanity, and they learned the truth. Some prey fights back. Some storms cannot be stopped. Some species would rather die than kneel. And once the galaxy remembered that truth, the age of empires was over. The age of freedom had begun.